She laughed and said, "Oh, that's just the janitor." I was standing there, tray of cookies in my hand, the same cookies Marjorie used to bake. I'd cleaned the house top to bottom for their dinner party, the house I built with my own 2 hands, and my daughter-in-law told her friends I was the janitor. They chuckled politely. My son didn't even look at me. That night, I sat alone in the basement they'd let me live in, and I realized, they didn't see me as family anymore. That's when I knew. It was time. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always the janitor. There was a time when I was dad, and that meant something. My boy, Ethan, used to run to the door when I got home from work, arms stretched wide, calling out my name like I was a superhero. And in those moments, maybe I was. Maybe I was everything. Back then, I worked long days at the local lumber mill. Rough work, honest work. My hands were always blistered, calloused. Marjorie used to wrap them in warm towels at night and rub salve into the cracks. She said she liked the way they felt, like a man who never quits. We had a small house at first. A rental on Grover Street. Tiny kitchen, leaky windows, 1 bathroom shared between the 3 of us. But it was filled with warmth. I remember Ethan playing on the kitchen floor while Marjorie hummed old Motown songs, stirring her stew. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And that was always enough. When Ethan turned 10, I started working overtime so I could buy a plot of land just outside town. I didn't tell him, or Marjorie, until the papers were signed. That Christmas, I handed her a box with nothing but a folded deed inside. She cried. Not a loud cry, just soft, like something inside her cracked open. She looked at me and whispered, "This'll be our forever, won't it?" It was. I built that house myself. Every board, every nail. Marjorie would sit out on a folding chair and bring me lemonade while Ethan held the tape measure and tried to act like he understood blueprints. He used to say, "Someday, I'll live here with my kids too." And I'd laugh, ruffle his hair, and say, "That's the plan, son." Marjorie loved the garden. It wasn't big, just 2 raised beds and a border of roses, but she treated it like Eden. Every spring, she'd wear that wide straw hat and hum to the plants as she watered them. Ethan used to pick her daisies and give them to her like he was presenting treasure. And she'd act surprised every time, like it was the first flower she'd ever seen. Even as Ethan got older and friends started replacing bedtime stories, he never lost that warmth, not completely. He'd help me fix gutters, mow the lawn without being asked, and sit with Marjorie on the porch on Sunday evenings, listening to her ramble about the neighbors or her newest pie recipe. Those moments were quiet, simple, but they filled me up in ways I didn't understand until they were gone. Then came college. Ethan got into a school 2 states over. I was proud, more than proud, I was terrified. The house felt too quiet without his stomping footsteps or late-night fridge raids. But we made it work. Marjorie sent care packages every month, always with a little note in her messy handwriting, "Eat well. Sleep more. Call your mother." And he did. He always called. He came home for summers, always tan and thinner, full of new stories. That's when he met Claire. She worked part-time at the bookstore downtown. Polished, sharp, soft voice and perfect posture. Marjorie took to her right away. She said Claire reminded her of those girls in the old Sears catalogs, pretty, poised, always smiling. I remember thinking she was a little distant. Polite, yes. But there was something in the way she looked at our house, like it was beneath her. She never said anything outright, but I noticed things. The way she'd brush invisible dust off the chairs. The way her smile tightened when Marjorie offered her leftover stew in a reused margarine container. Still, I kept my mouth shut. Ethan was happy, and that's all that mattered to me. When Marjorie fell ill, pancreatic cancer, fast and brutal, everything changed. I lost the light of my life in less than a year. She fought hard, smiled through it, even as the pain hollowed her out. Her last words to me were, "Make sure Ethan knows where he came from." I promised her I would. After she passed, Ethan moved back in. Claire came too, not yet married, just staying for a bit. I didn't argue. The house was too quiet without Marjorie. I welcomed the noise, the company. I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd become a family again. I gave them the upstairs. Said I'd take the basement, just until they get settled. I thought it would be temporary. I thought kindness would be returned. I thought wrong. But back then, in those early months, I clung to hope. I kept busy. Fixed the porch swing Marjorie always loved. Repainted the shutters. Took up baking, of all things. Tried her old recipes. Burned half of them, but I kept trying. Ethan worked remotely, and Claire, well, she seemed to manage things. She organized the kitchen, changed the curtains, redecorated the living room in shades of gray and gold. My old recliner disappeared one day, didn't match the aesthetic, she said. I let it go. It was just a chair. Still, some nights, I'd sit outside on the porch with Marjorie's old hat in my lap and wonder where the warmth had gone. Ethan was still kind, still smiled, still asked how I was doing, but something was missing. He seemed careful. Like being around me made him uncomfortable, like he was afraid I'd say something outdated or embarrassing in front of Claire. I chalked it up to grief. To adjustment. To age. But looking back, the good years had already ended. I just hadn't realized it yet. And maybe that was the real tragedy, I was holding on to a version of my family that only existed in memory. The house was still here. The walls still echoed with laughter from a better time. But the people inside? They were strangers wearing familiar faces. It started small. That's how these things always do. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly feel unwanted, it creeps in. Quietly. Like a slow leak beneath your floorboards. You only realize something's wrong when your socks are already soaked. The first time Claire corrected me in front of guests, I brushed it off. We were in the kitchen. I'd mentioned something about how Marjorie used to use vinegar to clean the windows, said it left them streak-free. Claire laughed lightly and said, "That's an old myth, Dad. We use non-toxic cleaner now." Then she turned to her friends and added, "He's still stuck in the 70s, bless him." It stung, but I smiled. Tried to laugh. I didn't want to be that father-in-law, the bitter one who can't take a joke. But over the weeks, it kept happening. Little things. I'd ask if anyone wanted help unloading groceries, and she'd say, "No, it's okay, you just relax." Every time, just relax. Like I was some kind of houseplant. Harmless. Useless. There to be kept out of the way. Once, I offered to help with the dishes after dinner. Claire looked me dead in the eye and said, "Oh, no need. You've done enough." I didn't know what that meant. I asked Ethan later, but he just said, "She's trying to be polite, Dad." Polite. That's one word for it. She started redecorating the house more aggressively after that. First the curtains, then the hallway photos. One day I came home from a walk, and the entire living room had been rearranged, my bookshelf was gone, and so was the old cabinet Marjorie used to keep her keepsakes in. I asked where it went. Claire said, "Oh, I donated it. We needed more space." It was too sentimental. I wanted to scream. But I just nodded. I didn't want to make waves. Not in my own home. Then came the locks. I noticed the pantry had a new childproof latch. Strange, since there weren't any kids around. Then the garage door opener disappeared from my side of the basement. When I asked Ethan, he just said, we've had some break-ins lately, thought it'd be safer. Break-ins? We live in the same house. I've had that garage code memorized for 20 years. That's when the unease began. I'd be upstairs fixing myself a cup of tea, and Claire would come in and watch me, not speak, just watch. Like I was trespassing. She started labeling things in the fridge: Claire's, Ethan's, do not touch. I didn't see a label with my name on it. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen cleaning up crumbs on the counter when she walked in with her phone to her ear. I overheard her say, "Yeah, it's hard when you live with someone who doesn't get boundaries. He just roams around. Roams. Like I was some stray cat." Ethan rarely stepped in. When I brought it up, he'd either deflect or sigh like a teenager. "She's just stressed. She doesn't mean anything by it. Don't take it personally, Dad." But that's the thing, when someone disrespects you in your own home, how can it not be personal? I began to notice changes in Ethan too. He stopped sitting with me during sports games. We used to cheer together, argue over stats. Now he just stayed upstairs. "Work's been crazy," he'd say. Work had always been crazy. That never stopped him before. He stopped calling me Dad as often. Started using hey or just nodding. He stopped asking me for advice, even when I knew he needed it. Once, I overheard them arguing about their finances. Claire was worried about their credit card bills. I offered to help, not with money, just with a budget spreadsheet I'd made years ago. Ethan looked at me like I'd offered to take over their lives. "No, we've got it, thanks." That thanks was sharp. Like a blade tucked in a handshake. One evening, I came up for dinner, the smell of baked salmon in the air, and saw 3 plates set on the table. Just 3. No fourth. No space. Claire looked surprised. "Oh, we thought you ate already." I hadn't. I'd been downstairs reading. No one had said a word. I nodded, turned around, and ate a sandwich alone in the basement. That was the night I started hearing them call the upper floor their house. Claire was talking on speakerphone again. "Yeah, we've finally got the house just how we want it. Our house is really coming together. Our house." I remember sitting on the basement steps, staring up at the ceiling, thinking, no. It's not yours. It never was. But I said nothing. I kept telling myself maybe I was being sensitive. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Maybe grief had made me paranoid. But deep down, I knew. One morning, I caught Claire opening a letter from the insurance company addressed to me. She tried to act casual, said she thought it was a bill. I asked her to give me any unopened mail from now on. She rolled her eyes and said, "Okay, okay. No need to make it weird." Make it weird. I was starting to feel like a guest. No, less than that. A guest gets offered coffee. A guest is treated with kindness, even if it's fake. I was being managed. Handled. Pushed gently out of the way, bit by bit. And the worst part? My son, my only child, was watching it happen. And doing nothing. But I still held on. Still clung to the good years. Still believed, maybe, if I just gave it more time, things would settle. I'd lost Marjorie. I couldn't bear the thought of losing Ethan too. I thought love would be enough. But love doesn't survive in silence. And I was drowning in it. The day it happened, the house was full of laughter, not mine, of course, but theirs. Claire had invited her friends over for one of her wine and wellness nights. Something about vision boards and self-empowerment. I kept to myself, as I always did on those evenings. Wasn't my crowd. Wasn't my place anymore. Still, I liked to tidy up before guests arrived. Old habits. Marjorie used to say a clean home was a kind home. I swept the porch, laid out fresh towels in the guest bathroom, and even baked a batch of oatmeal raisin cookies, her recipe. They used to be Ethan's favorite. I brought them upstairs on a tray, intending to just drop them off and disappear. I wasn't trying to make an appearance, I knew how Claire felt about me lingering. She said I changed the vibe. I was halfway to the kitchen when I heard her voice, light and airy, like she was in the middle of telling a joke. "No, that's not the chef. That's just the janitor," she laughed. "You know, built-in help. Perks of having an old man in the basement." The whole room chuckled. Not a hard laugh, but the kind people do when they're not sure if they should, the laugh that fills silence and makes you complicit. I froze. My fingers tightened on the tray. The cookies tilted slightly, one sliding off the edge onto the carpet. No one noticed. I stood in the doorway for a second too long. Claire turned, saw me, and her face drained for just a moment before she smiled that tight, polite smile of hers. "Oh. There he is," she said, still playing it off. "Speak of the devil. Thank you for the cookies, Mr. W." "Dad," I said quietly. She blinked. "Right. Of course." I didn't say anything else. I couldn't. My mouth had gone dry. I set the tray down on the counter, turned around, and walked out. The room fell awkwardly quiet behind me. Ethan didn't say a word. Not one. Later that night, I waited. Maybe he'd come down. Maybe he'd knock on the basement door, apologize, say something like, "She didn't mean it, Dad." I should have said something. I stayed awake for hours. But the door never opened. I sat there in the dim light of my basement room, staring at Marjorie's old garden gloves hanging by the door. She used to forget them outside, and I'd always bring them in. She said it made her feel taken care of. And here I was, in the home we built together, being mistaken for hired help. No, not mistaken. Dismissed. Deliberately. It wasn't just a joke. It was how she saw me. And if Ethan let her say it, then maybe it was how he saw me, too. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I made coffee, watered the plants out front, nodded politely when I passed Claire on the stairs. She didn't apologize. Just gave me that same half-smile and said, "Morning." Ethan came downstairs, dressed in his usual business casual. I waited until Claire went upstairs to ask him quietly, "Did you hear what she said last night?" He hesitated. Just a flicker. Then he said, "It was a joke, Dad. Don't take it so seriously." "A joke," I repeated. He sighed. "You know how she is. She didn't mean anything by it." I looked at him for a long time, and in that silence, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit before: he wasn't going to defend me. Not then. Not ever. That evening, I went outside and sat on the back porch. The sky was that deep summer orange Marjorie always loved. She'd called it mango light. Said it made the world feel softer. I sat there for hours, watching the shadows stretch across the lawn. At one point, Claire opened the sliding door and peeked out. "We're heading out for dinner," she said. I didn't answer. "You okay?" she asked after a moment, her voice carefully neutral. I turned to her. "Do you really think I'm just the janitor?" Her eyes widened, just a little, then narrowed. "I didn't mean it like that. You're being sensitive." Sensitive. That word hit me harder than the joke ever did. "I built this house," I said, my voice low but steady. "With my hands. Every beam, every nail. Marjorie and I poured our lives into it." "I know," she said quickly. "Of course. It was just a joke," I finished for her. "Right." She shifted, looked uncomfortable. "Look, we didn't mean to offend you. But, it's just different now. We're trying to build our life here too. And sometimes, you being so involved, it makes things harder. There it was. Not the joke. Not the insult. The truth. I wasn't just unwelcome. I was in the way. I nodded once, stood up, and walked past her without another word. Her perfume lingered in the air like smoke. Sharp and artificial. In the basement, I closed the door, locked it, and sat at my desk. I pulled out the drawer where I kept Marjorie's old documents, the original house deed, her will, photos of us building the place. My hands trembled slightly as I sifted through the papers. There, tucked between two envelopes, was a note she'd written years ago. Just a scrap, barely legible. But I remembered it. She'd scribbled it after we finalized the mortgage. This house belongs to love. Never let anyone forget that. I stared at that note for a long, long time. And I knew what I had to do. They'd forgotten. And it was time I reminded them. The betrayal should have ended with that janitor remark, but it didn't. That was just the beginning. A symptom of something deeper. I didn't realize how deep until I overheard Claire one evening, whispering on the phone just outside the basement door. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. I'd come up to refill my water bottle and heard her voice on the other side of the door. The door was cracked open, just a sliver. Enough. She was saying, we're trying to speed it up, but he won't go quietly. Ethan says we have to be careful, Dad's sentimental about the house. But once the paperwork's in, he won't have a say. My heart stopped. I leaned closer, holding my breath. I mean, it's not even legally in his name anymore, right? He added Ethan years ago. Technically, we can move things around without a big fight. Just need to get power of attorney filed before anything happens to him. She laughed softly. Honestly, I don't think he even reads his mail anymore. I stepped back, silent, numb. My throat burned like I'd swallowed fire. I went back downstairs, sat at my desk, and tried to piece together what I'd just heard. Power of attorney? Paperwork? House transfers? She wasn't just rude. She wasn't just dismissive. She was planning to take the house. My house. I barely slept that night. I stared at the ceiling and thought about Marjorie's note again, this house belongs to love. And yet here I was, a ghost in my own home, being managed like a liability. Something to handle. In the morning, I walked to the mailbox before anyone else. I rarely did that, Claire usually got the mail these days. Said she liked to stay on top of the bills. But something told me to look. Sure enough, there it was, a fat envelope addressed to Ethan, from a legal firm downtown. The name sounded familiar, I'd seen it on a pamphlet months ago Claire left lying around, Estate Planning for Modern Families. I brought the envelope inside and sat down at the dining table. My hands shook as I ran a finger under the flap and unfolded the papers. Power of attorney application. Warranty deed draft. Property valuation forms. A sticky note, have Dad sign the new will, just say it's a medical consent form. I felt the blood drain from my face. They weren't just taking the house. They were going to trick me into giving it away. I heard the floorboards creak upstairs. I stuffed the papers back into the envelope, sealed it, and shoved it under my shirt. Then I walked calmly down to the basement and locked the door behind me. I sat at my desk for hours, reading those documents again and again, trying to find the cracks. The loopholes. Anything. But what hit me hardest wasn't the legal jargon. It was Ethan's silence. This wasn't Claire acting alone. He was part of it. Maybe not the mastermind, but he'd given his blessing. Signed forms. Handed over trust. Chosen convenience over character. That realization cut deeper than anything else. I pulled out one of the old photo albums, the green one with the leather binding. I flipped through pages of Ethan's childhood, his first steps in the living room, Marjorie holding him on the porch swing, the three of us building the treehouse. His 7th birthday party, the year I made him a wooden toy chest from scratch. He said it was his favorite gift. I remembered the way he looked at me back then. With admiration. With love. I didn't recognize the man he'd become. I kept thinking of Marjorie. Of how careful she'd been about paperwork, even when she was sick. She'd insisted we keep the house in both our names and add Ethan as a precaution after her diagnosis, in case something happens. I never imagined that decision would be used against me. I remembered her saying, in one of her final lucid moments, people change when money's on the table. Even the ones you raised right. I didn't want to believe her. But here I was, living it. Over the next few days, I pretended everything was normal. I let Claire go on about the neighborhood association, Ethan talk about his new promotion, the two of them act like they still saw me as family. But I saw the truth now. Every smile was strategy. Every polite word was performance. I watched them more closely. Claire was on the phone constantly, sometimes in hushed tones, sometimes sounding rehearsed. Ethan avoided eye contact more often, barely acknowledging me unless I asked a direct question. One afternoon, I walked past their bedroom while they were out and noticed a pile of papers on Claire's desk. Curiosity got the better of me. I peeked. They'd printed out a checklist. Steps to prepare property for transfer. Item number 3 was underlined, get current occupant to vacate or sign off on property access. I went back to the basement and sat in the quiet. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel sadness. I felt focus. They were planning their move. And now, so was I. Speech balloon. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I waited for the right moment. I wanted to ask him face to face. Not in anger, not with yelling. Just, truth. I still held on to some tiny sliver of hope, that maybe he didn't know the whole plan. That maybe Claire had gone too far and Ethan had just gotten swept up in it. One night, after dinner, I found him alone on the back porch. He was sipping a beer, scrolling on his phone, the light from the screen bouncing off his glasses. I sat down beside him slowly, letting the silence settle first. He glanced over and nodded. Hey, Dad. I found the envelope, I said calmly. He froze. What envelope? I looked at him. Really looked. And I saw the flicker of guilt flash across his face before he tried to mask it. That was all the answer I needed. I heard Claire talking, I continued. About the deed. About the power of attorney. Ethan sighed and looked away, his jaw tightening. It's not what you think. I shook my head. Then explain it. He hesitated. We were just trying to plan ahead. That's all. Plan ahead? By tricking me into signing papers? By transferring the house out from under me? Dad, come on, don't make it sound like that, he said, defensive now. It's not like we're throwing you out. No? Then why all the paperwork behind my back? He rubbed his face. Because, you're getting older. And Claire's been worried. What if something happens to you and we're not legally able to help? She said it's safer this way. She said, I repeated. And what did you say? He didn't answer. That silence, that cowardly, heavy silence, was louder than any words. I built this house, I said softly. Your mother and I made every corner of it ours. I invited you back in. I gave you the upstairs. And now you want to sign me away like some broken piece of furniture? Ethan stood up abruptly. You're twisting this. I'm seeing it clearly, maybe for the first time. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask me to sit down, or try to calm me. He just walked inside and shut the sliding door behind him, leaving me out in the cooling night air, alone. That was the moment something hardened inside me. I wasn't going to beg for dignity. I wasn't going to plead for the right to remain in the home I created. No, if they wanted a plan, I'd give them one. The next morning, I went into town. I stopped by the bakery Marjorie used to love and ran into Jim, one of my old friends from the mill. He looked me up and down and said, "You all right, Tom? You look like someone's gut punched you." We sat on a bench with coffee and a cinnamon roll between us. I told him everything. Not all at once, but in pieces. He didn't interrupt. Just listened, eyes getting darker with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back and whistled through his teeth. "Damn," he muttered. "That's cold, man. Your own son?" I nodded. "He's not the boy I raised. Not anymore." Jim looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something that stuck with me. "People forget the quiet ones have the deepest roots. You've got more power than they think." He was right. I didn't need to yell or argue. I just needed to move, carefully, like chess. I'd spent my life playing defense. It was time to make my own move. That afternoon, I found the old folder Marjorie used to keep all our legal records in. Inside was the original deed, the one with both our names, before Ethan was ever added. I took it and the envelope I'd hidden from the mailbox, and I made an appointment with a lawyer downtown. I remembered her, Emily Tran. She had helped us years ago when we refinanced the house. She was Marjorie's age, kind but sharp. The kind of person who read everything twice. She looked over the documents, flipping slowly. "You're not crazy," she said eventually. "They're preparing to shift ownership. And that power of attorney form? That's no formality. If you'd signed it, they could have acted on your behalf, sold the house, moved your assets, made medical decisions." She looked me in the eye. "You did the right thing coming here." I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, relief. Maybe not victory, but at least footing. I wasn't lost. "Can I change the deed?" I asked. "Put it back fully in my name?" "You can," she nodded. "It'll take a few filings." "Do you want to include Ethan going forward?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about Marjorie's voice in my head, about the garden, about the nights we used to sit on the porch and plan our future. I thought about the boy Ethan was. And the man he'd become. "No," I said finally. "Not anymore." We went over the options, and I asked about wills, too. She suggested a clause: if the will is contested, the entire estate goes to charity. I liked that idea. It felt clean. When I left her office, the sun was starting to set. The world felt different, not better, but lighter. Like the weight was finally shifting. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Claire through the living room window. She was laughing, glass of wine in hand. Ethan was on the couch, phone in his face, oblivious. They still thought they held the cards. They didn't know I was finally playing my own game. The hardest part wasn't cutting Ethan out of the will. It was remembering why I ever put him in it to begin with. He was my boy. My only child. And for most of his life, that meant something. It meant legacy. It meant love passed from one generation to the next. It meant trust. But legacy doesn't mean what it used to. Not when it gets twisted into entitlement. Not when your son starts treating you like a loose end that needs tying up. I sat in Emily's office again the next morning, hands folded in my lap. She had laid out the documents, crisp and impersonal, on her desk. "Are you sure you want to proceed this way?" she asked gently. "Removing him entirely will be significant." I nodded. "Yes." She adjusted her glasses and started reading through each page, line by line, giving me time to process. There was no dramatic moment, no emotional breakdown. Just ink and paper. That's how betrayal becomes real, when it turns into legal language. I left him nothing. No portion of the house. No savings. No heirlooms. Not even Marjorie's jewelry, which I'd originally promised to pass down. Instead, I named a local charity, the one Marjorie used to volunteer with, as the secondary beneficiary. A clause was added: if the will is contested in any way, all assets automatically transfer to the charity in full. Emily called it a no contest clause. I called it insurance against greed. I signed the final page and sat back. My hands didn't shake like I thought they would. In fact, I felt calm. Quiet. Like a storm had passed through me, leaving only clarity behind. Emily slid the signed documents into a folder and handed me my copy. "You did the right thing," she said, not with pity, but with certainty. As I walked out, I passed a young couple in the waiting room. The man was holding his father's hand, helping him fill out a form. The older man looked frail, but the son looked proud, patient. I wondered if Ethan would even recognize himself in that image anymore. Driving home, I kept thinking about Marjorie's voice. Her warnings. Her wisdom. The night she told me, love doesn't excuse betrayal. You have to know when to stop giving. She'd said that after Ethan had come home from college and started talking about how outdated our way of life was. Back then, it was just a phase. We laughed it off. But maybe she saw the seeds I didn't. When I pulled into the driveway, Claire's car was gone. I walked in to find Ethan alone at the kitchen table, a bowl of cereal in front of him, scrolling his phone. "Hey, Dad," he said without looking up. It felt surreal. Just hours ago, I'd legally erased him from my future, and here he was, my own flesh and blood, asking if there was any milk left in the fridge. "There's a letter coming for you this week," I said. He looked up, confused. "What kind of letter?" "A legal one." He raised an eyebrow. "About what?" I didn't answer. I just looked at him, really looked. For a brief second, I saw that little boy again. The one who used to sit on my shoulders at the 4th of July parade. The one who cried when he scraped his knee and only stopped when Marjorie kissed it better. That boy was gone. Buried under years of small compromises and bigger silences. Ethan frowned. "Dad, what's going on?" "I'm just making sure things go where they're supposed to," I said. "After I'm gone." He laughed nervously. "You're not going anywhere." "I'm not planning to," I replied. "But you and Claire seem to be making plans, just in case." His face darkened. "She told you about the deed, didn't she?" "I heard her," I said. "I read the papers. I saw everything." He looked away, jaw tightening. "It wasn't like that. We were just trying to be responsible." "No," I said. "You were trying to get me out of the way. Quietly. Legally. And you thought I wouldn't notice." He didn't deny it. That silence, that lack of fight, told me everything. "I don't hate you," I said after a moment. "But I don't trust you anymore. And that's not something I can fix." I turned to leave, then stopped. "You should check the mailbox tomorrow." He didn't follow me. He didn't apologize. He just sat there, spoon in hand, the weight of a cereal bowl suddenly too heavy. Back in the basement, I sat in Marjorie's old chair. I ran my fingers along the worn armrest, where the fabric had thinned over time. She used to sit here in the evenings, knitting or humming or sometimes just thinking. I pulled her favorite photo out of the drawer, the one of us on the day we finished building the house. My shirt was soaked in sweat, she had dirt on her cheeks from the garden, and Ethan, no older than 10, stood between us grinning like the world had just begun. We were happy then. Whole. And now? Now, I was the only one left who remembered what it cost to build something with love. But at least I'd made sure no one else would tear it down without a fight. Tomorrow, the paperwork would arrive. And the foundation would shift, not under me this time, but under them. It happened on a Thursday. A day like any other, really. Clear sky, quiet air, coffee brewing upstairs. I was reading in the basement when I heard footsteps, Claire's heels, sharp and fast. Then Ethan's voice, lower, muttering something I couldn't make out. I didn't think much of it. I figured it was one of their usual schedule squabbles or brunch with someone she pretended to like. But then she knocked. That never happened. Claire never came to the basement door. She acted like it didn't exist most days. "Tom," she called out, her tone unusually sweet. "Can we talk?" I opened the door and stepped aside. She entered holding a large manila envelope. Ethan followed her, standing behind her like a shadow, arms crossed. Claire smiled. Not the tight, cold one. This one was wide. Practiced. Corporate. "We've been thinking a lot about the future," she began, "and we found a wonderful place we think you'll love." She handed me the envelope like it was a birthday card. I opened it slowly. Inside was a glossy brochure, Golden Pines Retirement Village, luxury senior living with dignity. Images of smiling old folks playing bingo and walking by artificial ponds filled the pages. There was even a sample calendar, aqua aerobics on Mondays, Bible study on Thursdays. I looked up at them, waiting for the punchline. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Claire, however, stayed locked in her role. "We've already spoken to the intake coordinator," she continued. "They're reserving a spot for you. It's affordable, and honestly, it'll be so much more comfortable than staying down here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're sending me to a nursing home?" I asked. Claire chuckled softly. "No, not a nursing home. It's independent living. But with support. You know, just in case." "In case of what?" I said, staring at her. Ethan finally spoke. "Dad, you've been isolated down here. It's not good for you. You need social interaction." "I have friends," I said flatly. "Friends who can drive you to your doctor's appointments." Claire cut in. "Friends who can help manage your prescriptions." My mouth went dry. "I'm not sick," I said. "I'm not senile. And I don't need managing." Ethan took a deep breath. "We're trying to help." "No," I said. "You're trying to remove me." They didn't respond. Just stood there, as if they were waiting for me to fold. I handed the brochure back to Claire, careful not to shake. "I'll pass." She frowned. "You don't even want to think about it?" "I have thought about it," I said. "Every day, ever since you started treating me like a tenant. I thought maybe I was imagining things. But this? This makes it clear." Ethan looked down. "Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be." That was it. That was the moment. Those words. I didn't say anything. I turned away, walked across the room, and opened the cabinet where I kept the documents from Emily. The deed. The revised will. The eviction notices. I slid out the top envelope and turned back to face them. "You're right," I said. "It doesn't need to be hard. This should make it pretty easy." I handed the envelope to Ethan. "What's this?" he asked. 30 days notice," I said calmly. "You and Claire are being evicted." They both stared at me, confused. Claire laughed nervously. "Is this a joke?" "No," I said. "You want me gone? Fine. But this is my house. I built it. I own it. And I won't be pushed out like some unwanted dog." Ethan opened the envelope and read the top of the letter. His face paled. "You transferred the deed?" he asked, stunned. "I took back what was always mine." Claire was speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "You can't just throw us out," Ethan said. "Yes, I can," I said. "And I am. You have until the end of the month. I suggest you start packing." Claire stepped forward. "You'll regret this, Tom. We were trying to take care of you." "No," I said firmly. "You were trying to control me. There's a difference." Ethan's shoulders sagged. "Dad. I raised you better than this," I said. "But somewhere along the way, you stopped listening." There was nothing left to say. I walked past them, climbed the stairs, and opened the front door. "You should go," I said over my shoulder. "Before I call the police." They left without another word. Claire stomped. Ethan trudged. And for the first time in years, I sat in the living room, my living room, and looked around without feeling invisible. The silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was sacred. Everything had changed now. They'd tried to bury me. But they forgot I was the one who laid the foundation. It was supposed to be a birthday party. Claire's idea, of course. Her father was turning 70, and she wanted to throw a big event in my backyard. When she announced the plan 2 months prior, she called it our treat to him. I wasn't consulted. Just told. "Just family and a few friends," she said casually, as if my lawn and my grill were hers to offer. But this was before the eviction notice. Before I reminded them that the house, the land, every blade of grass they stood on, it belonged to me. Still, they held on to hope. They hadn't moved out yet, 19 days into their 30-day notice, and Claire insisted the party would be their last hurrah before settling somewhere more suitable. I let them plan. Let them send the invites, hang up the lights, rent the tables. I even mowed the lawn the day before, watching Ethan carry platters and decorations like nothing had changed. They had no idea what was coming. I wore my best shirt that day, the same one Marjorie bought me for our last anniversary. Pale blue with little white buttons. She always said it brought out my eyes. I stayed out of sight during setup. Claire's voice echoed across the yard, chirping orders like a wedding planner. Ethan followed, silent and tired. The guests started arriving around 5. People I didn't recognize, some family on her side, a few coworkers, one man who brought his dog. I stayed near the garden, out of the way but watching. Then I saw her. Claire, in a bright yellow dress, holding a flute of champagne and smiling that same wide, calculated smile. "He's just staying until we get our new place," I heard her say to a woman in heels. "He's been stubborn, but we're working through it. He's had a hard time letting go." Letting go. I stepped back into the house and returned with an envelope. I'd prepared it days ago. Not just the formal eviction notice, which they'd already received, but photocopies of the new deed, the will, and, just for good measure, a typed letter explaining everything. Every lie. Every quiet betrayal. I waited until everyone was seated, Claire's father at the head table, smiling under a string of lights, a cake the size of a tire in front of him. Then I stepped up. No microphone. No raised voice. Just a man with tired eyes and truth on his tongue. "Sorry to interrupt," I said. All heads turned. Claire's face froze in mid-laugh. Ethan looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. "I just wanted to say a few words," I continued, holding the envelope loosely. "Since this will be the last party you'll be hosting here." There were murmurs. Claire stepped forward, her smile cracking. "Tom, please." "No," I said firmly. "You've had your say. Now it's my turn." I turned to the crowd. "For those of you who don't know, I'm Tom," Claire's father-in-law. This house, this yard, this land, I built it. With my wife, Marjorie. She passed 10 years ago, but her spirit lives in every corner of this place. A few people nodded politely. Others looked away, sensing the shift in tone. I welcomed my son and his wife into my home when they needed help. I gave them the upstairs, kept to myself in the basement. I cleaned, I cooked, I kept out of their way. And in return, I paused, holding up the envelope, they tried to steal this house from under me. There were gasps. Claire stepped forward again. That's not. They prepared documents, I said, louder now. Power of attorney forms. Property transfer drafts. Claire joked to her friends that I was just the janitor. The crowd fell silent. I wasn't supposed to hear it. But I did. Claire's father was looking around, confused. The guests sat stiffly in their chairs, unsure of whether to move or speak. I've revoked everything, I said. The house is mine again. The will has been updated. And if anyone contests it, it all goes to charity. Every last penny. I placed the envelope on the table in front of Ethan. You have 11 days left. After that, I expect you gone. Claire's voice cracked. You're humiliating us. No, I said, turning to her. You did that to yourselves. I'm just giving you the dignity of truth. Ethan looked down at the table. Not a word. Not even a whisper of defense. I turned to leave, the evening light casting long shadows behind me. No one clapped. No one said a word. They just watched. And in that silence, something shifted. I wasn't the janitor. I wasn't the doormat. I was the man who remembered what mattered, and who finally stood up to protect it. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The next morning, the house was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. Not like the mornings when Marjorie used to sip her tea on the porch and hum old melodies. No, this was a hollow quiet. Heavy. Cold. The kind that sinks into your bones. They didn't speak to me after the party. No screaming match. No apology. Just avoidance. I heard them moving around upstairs, muffled footsteps, doors opening and closing, the scraping of furniture being dragged across floors. They were packing. For once, I didn't care what they took. The kitchen chairs. The guest room pillows. The little decorative signs Claire had nailed into the hallway without asking, live, laugh, love, in curly script. Take it all. Just leave. I spent most of the day outside. The air still smelled faintly of smoke from the party, leftover coals, plastic cups, the kind of synthetic aftertaste you can't quite scrub out. I walked the garden paths slowly, pulling weeds from Marjorie's rose beds. Her gloves still hung by the back door, weathered and stiff from age. I slipped them on. They didn't fit like they used to, but I wore them anyway. Some of the petals were turning brown around the edges. I trimmed them carefully, whispering under my breath like she used to, "Don't worry, girl. We're getting you back to yourself." Every snip of the shears was like cutting away something rotten. That night, I slept soundly. The first real sleep I'd had in weeks. No pacing, no replaying arguments, no dread. Just stillness. The next day, I went into town for groceries. At the store, people looked at me a little differently. Not rudely, just curious. Word had spread. In a small town like ours, news moves like wildfire, especially when it's personal. A confrontation at a party? An eviction? That was fuel for weeks of quiet coffee shop chatter. I ran into Judy, the pharmacist's wife. She stopped me in the canned goods aisle and said, "Tom, I heard some things. I just want to say, I think you did what you had to do." I thanked her. That's all I wanted. Not praise. Not attention. Just acknowledgement. Outside the store, I sat on the bench across from the old Veterans Center. It had fallen into disrepair over the years, peeling paint, overgrown weeds, windows boarded up from storms no one had the funds to fix. I looked at it for a long time. Something stirred in me. That place used to matter. Used to be alive. Just like this house. When I got home, the driveway was clear. Claire's car was gone. I stepped inside and noticed the living room had been stripped bare. The couch. The coffee table. The TV. Fine. The walls were quiet again. I walked upstairs, for the first time in a long while. It felt strange, stepping into rooms I'd once avoided to give them space. The bedroom Ethan used to sleep in was empty now. Closet doors open, mattress stripped. I found a folded piece of paper on the windowsill. One line, in Ethan's handwriting. I'm sorry it ended like this. No name. No explanation. Just that. It should have meant something. But all I felt was a dull throb behind my ribs. Not pain, just fatigue. I walked back downstairs and made myself a cup of tea. Sat in Marjorie's old chair. Let the steam rise and swirl in the afternoon sun. Later, I found myself sitting out front on the porch. The wind carried the scent of pine and cut grass. I closed my eyes and let it settle over me. Then I heard a soft voice. Grandpa? I opened my eyes. There she was, Lily. My granddaughter. Ethan and Claire's daughter. She stood at the edge of the porch steps, holding a little canvas bag and wearing a hesitant smile. Her hair was in a ponytail, and she had the same dimple Ethan used to have when he smiled without shame. I wasn't sure if I should come, she said quietly. Dad said you might not want to see us. I don't want to see them, I said gently. But you're not them. She climbed the steps slowly and sat beside me. The porch creaked under her light frame. I don't know what happened exactly, she said. They won't tell me much. Just that, things got ugly. I looked at her. She was young, maybe 20, maybe a little less. Old enough to see through the masks. Smart enough to ask the right questions. They tried to take something that didn't belong to them, I said. And when I said no, they didn't like it. She nodded slowly, then reached into her bag. I brought some of Grandma's old recipes, she said. I've been going through her box. I want to learn how to make the peach cobbler. Do you remember how she used to cut the crust like a lattice? I smiled for the first time in days. I remember, I said. We sat there, watching the sun dip below the trees, talking about Marjorie's garden, the way the house used to smell on Sunday afternoons, and how Lily remembered the old radio Marjorie used to play while cooking. The silence after a storm is a strange thing. You think it'll be unbearable, too quiet, too sharp. But sometimes, it's just the beginning of peace. The house echoed for days after they left. Every room carried the outline of what used to be. The couch's faded shadow on the carpet. Little nail holes where Claire had hung her minimalist art. The dent on the wall from when Ethan accidentally bumped a dresser during the move-in. I stood in each space, not with sadness anymore, but with clarity. It was mine again, and not just in name. One morning, I walked past Marjorie's old reading room, the sunroom with the lace curtains and chipped rocking chair. That's when the idea hit me. What if I brought it back to life? Not just the room. The whole house. Not as a museum of grief. Not as a quiet retreat for an old man waiting for time to pass. But something alive. Something that served. I thought about the Veterans Center I'd seen last week, abandoned, forgotten. Just like so many people in this town once they turned 60. I remembered Jim from the mill telling me about old buddies sleeping in their cars, waiting on pensions that never came. There was space here. I had time. I had a house full of memories, and room for new ones. I called Emily, my lawyer. Told her I wanted to refile the property not just in my name, but as part of a trust, something that could outlive me. I want to turn my house into something useful, I said. A place for people like me. People left behind. She sounded surprised. Then impressed. We started the paperwork the next day. Next, I called Jim. You ever fix drywall? I asked. He laughed. Only if you don't mind it crooked. I told him I'd take it. You know any other guys who might want to pitch in? I've got a few rooms that could use sprucing up. He called back that night with 4 names. Retired electricians, a plumber who worked part-time at the hardware store, and one widower who just needed something to do besides talk to his cat. They came that Saturday, 6 men, all over 60, with toolboxes, coffee thermoses, and stories to share. We cleared out the upstairs guest rooms. Repainted the walls. Repaired loose floorboards. Installed better lighting. I let them choose the colors, soft blues, greens, earthy tones. We didn't want the house to feel sterile. We wanted it to feel like home. Each room got a plaque above the door. Not with names, but memories. One said, Marjorie's Garden View. Another, Front Porch Dreams. It was slow work, but good work. The kind that leaves your arms sore and your soul full. Neighbors started stopping by. Some brought pies. Some brought blankets or old furniture. A teenage boy showed up one afternoon with his dad, carrying a refurbished desk. My mom heard what you were doing, the man said. Said this belonged to her father. Thought maybe someone else could use it. We put it in the first completed room. I had a vision now, not a retirement home, not a shelter, but a respite. A place where people like me, alone, overlooked, could come stay a while. Rest. Heal. Reclaim some dignity. I called it Marjorie's house. Not out loud at first. Just to myself, under my breath as I worked. But soon, everyone started calling it that. Tom, where do you want this chair, upstairs or in Marjorie's house? Hey, can I leave these towels at Marjorie's house tomorrow? It stuck. And somehow, it felt right. A few weeks in, I got a letter from the charity I'd listed in my will, the one Marjorie used to volunteer at. The director, a woman named April, had heard through town what I was building. She asked if we'd be open to hosting small community dinners or quiet counseling sessions for older folks. I think your space has a soul, she wrote. And some people just need a place to be heard. I wrote back, yes. We're ready when you are. Lily started visiting more often. She'd come by with bags of groceries, notebooks full of recipes, questions about Marjorie's favorite music. Do you think she'd be okay with me helping? She asked one day. I smiled. She'd be proud. You've got her kindness. We started a little ritual, Friday evenings on the porch, a pot of tea between us, soft music playing from Marjorie's radio. Sometimes Jim joined us. Sometimes one of the new residents sat nearby, quietly listening. There was no tension. No walking on eggshells. Just warmth. One night, Lily looked around the porch and said, "It's strange. This house used to feel so stiff. Now it feels like it's breathing again." I nodded. It's alive because people care again. She leaned back in her chair. You know, Grandpa, most people wouldn't have done what you did. They would have just stayed quiet, let the family take over, disappeared into a little corner. I looked at her. I've spent a lot of years believing silence was strength, I said. But silence lets the wrong people get loud. Sometimes, speaking up isn't just about saving yourself. It's about saving what matters. She reached over and squeezed my hand. That was the night I knew, this wasn't just a project. It was purpose. I wasn't just filling empty rooms. I was filling the house with the very thing that had been missing for so long, respect. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for life to happen. I was building it, again. From the inside out. It started with Mr. Jenkins. He arrived on a Tuesday morning, hunched over a single suitcase and wearing a pressed shirt that didn't quite fit his frame. Widowed 3 years. Retired from the post office. No kids. Said he heard about Marjorie's house from a friend at the VFW. I don't want to be a burden, he said quietly, standing in the doorway like a man asking for permission to breathe. You won't be, I replied. We showed him to the corner room, the one overlooking the lilacs. He cried when he saw the quilt folded neatly on the bed. I haven't had a place feel like mine in a long time. I understood. 2 days later, came Alma, 72, sharp-witted, former music teacher. She brought her own kettle and a box of Earl Grey and told me I needed more color in the dining room. I'm not a guest, she said, eyeing the beige walls. I'm family. And family deserves warmth. So she painted. Bright yellow accents, soft greens, even a mural of garden vines along one hallway wall. It made the house glow. Then came Curtis, then Nora, then Henry. Each person brought their own rhythm. Their own story. Their own pain and grace. They cooked. They cleaned. They helped in the garden. But more than anything, they talked. To each other. To me. To the silence that used to smother this place. It wasn't blood that bound us. It was understanding. Respect. Humanity. One morning, I came into the kitchen and found Curtis and Lily making pancakes. Flour on their elbows, batter on the counter, the radio playing an old Sinatra tune. Grandpa. Lily called. We're trying your wife's recipe, think we nailed it. Curtis grinned, flipping a lopsided pancake. It's a team effort. She's the boss, though. Watching them, a man pushing 80 and a young woman who still wore high-top sneakers with her dresses, laughing together in my kitchen, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. This was family. Not the kind tied by DNA or last names. But the kind that shows up. Listens. Fills the silence without demanding space. Alma took over Sunday dinners. We started setting 2 long tables in the backyard, under the string lights Claire once picked for her parties. Now, they illuminated stories, not secrets. Neighbors dropped by. Former co-workers. Even the teenage boy with the desk came back, this time with his guitar. He played soft background music while Henry recited poetry from memory. And all the while, I watched the house transform. Not just physically, though, yes, it was brighter, cleaner, more alive. But spiritually. There was laughter in the halls again. The kind that wrapped around your spine and reminded you why you ever bothered staying. And through it all, Lily never stopped coming. She was my constant. She painted signs with me, helped me organize books, asked questions about Marjorie I hadn't been asked in years. Did she ever want to travel? What was her favorite flower? Was she scared when she got sick? We talked for hours. One afternoon, she brought me a small box. Inside was a necklace, a single silver pendant in the shape of a house. She always made me feel safe, Lily said, eyes shining. I wanted to make sure this place always felt like that for someone else. I couldn't speak. Just hugged her. Tight. That night, as the others played cards in the dining room, I walked through the garden alone. The breeze was soft, the roses swaying gently, just like Marjorie liked. And I said aloud, "You were right. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stays when everything else falls apart. The next day, something strange happened. Ethan's car pulled into the driveway. He didn't get out right away. Just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the house. I watched from the porch, not moving, not waving. Eventually, he stepped out. No briefcase. No Claire. He looked older. Not in the way time does, in the way regret does. "Hi, Dad," he said softly. I nodded. Said nothing. He looked around, the fresh paint, the flowers, the laughter coming from inside. "This place feels different," he said. "It is. I heard what you're doing. Lily told me." I didn't respond. He looked down at his shoes. I was wrong. About everything. About Claire. About how I let it all happen. I nodded again. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Truly. We stood in silence for a moment. The wind picked up, scattering petals across the walkway. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "But I'm not the man you used to come home to either." He swallowed hard. I figured. "Good," I said. "Because I'm not here to rebuild what you broke." He nodded. "Can I say hi to Lily?" "She's out back," I said. "But I'll let her decide." He started to turn, then paused. "It's a good thing you're doing here, Dad." I looked him in the eye. "I'm not doing it for you." Then I turned and walked back inside. As I stepped through the door, I was met with warm smells, soft music, and laughter. Family. Real family. The kind that chooses each other. That builds together. That doesn't take without giving. Marjorie's house was no longer a memory. It was a movement. It had been weeks since Ethan showed up. I didn't expect to see him again. Truth be told, I didn't spend much time thinking about it. Life had filled in the spaces where bitterness used to live. The house was busy now, not loud, but alive. Every day had a rhythm. But then, on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was strange, people didn't ring the bell at Marjorie's house anymore. They knocked. Or just came in with a wave and a "hello" from the hallway. This was something else. I opened the door and found Claire. She looked thinner. Less polished. Her blouse wrinkled, no heels, just simple flats and a plain purse. Her eyes were tired, not the kind of tired from work or stress, but the kind that comes from losing something you thought you'd never have to earn. We stood there for a second, both of us blinking under the porch light. "Hi, Tom," she said. "Claire." "I won't stay long," she said quickly, her voice quiet. "I just wanted to return something." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. Marjorie's wedding ring. I stared at it. "I found it in one of Ethan's drawers," she continued. "I think he meant to return it, or didn't know how." I took the box slowly, opened it, and saw the gold band nestled inside, its edges still worn from years of gardening and dishwashing and reaching for Ethan when he cried. I didn't speak. Claire stepped back, like she'd expected nothing more than the exchange. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not just for that. For all of it." She looked out at the yard, the garden blooming again, the chairs set up for Sunday dinner, the freshly painted shutters. "I didn't understand what this place meant to you." "Not really." "I thought I did." "You thought it was a house," I said softly. She nodded. "But it was a home. A real one. And I didn't grow up with that. I didn't know how to honor it." Her voice cracked on that last part, and for the first time, I saw past the polish. Past the ambition and control. I saw a woman who had never been taught how to love something without trying to own it. "I never meant to take it from you," she said. "No," I replied. "You just didn't care if you did." She winced, but nodded. "You're right." A long silence followed. Birds chirped in the background. The scent of fresh basil drifted from the herb boxes Lily had planted on the porch. "Do you hate me?" Claire asked. I looked at her carefully. "No," I said. "But I don't trust you. And I don't think I ever really did." She bit her lip, nodded, and stepped down the porch steps. Halfway to the car, she stopped. "You did something good here, Tom. Really good." Then she left. I closed the door quietly, walked to the kitchen, and placed Marjorie's ring back in her keepsake box. It felt heavier now. Not with pain, with meaning. Like it had found its way home again. That evening, I sat on the porch with Lily. She was reading a cookbook, her feet tucked under her on the rocking chair. "You seem quiet tonight," she said. "Someone visited." She looked up. "Dad?" "No," I said. "Claire." Her eyes widened. What did she want? Closure, maybe. Or peace. Maybe just to be heard. She nodded slowly, then asked, "Did you give it to her?" "Some of it," I replied. But I didn't lie. She closed the book and leaned her head against the chair. "It's hard, isn't it? Knowing when to forgive and when to protect yourself." I looked out at the garden, the sky melting into gold. "It is," I said. "But sometimes protecting yourself is the only way to love yourself." She reached over and took my hand. "I'm proud of you, Grandpa." I turned to her and smiled. "I'm proud of us." Inside, Alma was setting the table for dinner. Mr. Jenkins was humming softly while folding napkins. Curtis was grilling vegetables out back, wearing a ridiculous apron that said, "King of the Grill," but still modest. Ethan didn't come back. And maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he couldn't. But that was no longer my burden to carry. This house, this life, it was no longer about who left or who failed me. It was about who stayed. Who showed up. Who loved without strings. Speech balloon: would you have let your son back into your life? Let us know in the comments. The ribbon fluttered in the breeze, stretched across the newly painted white gate. It wasn't a grand affair, no news crew, no balloons, no podium. Just a simple ceremony with a crooked pair of scissors, a homemade banner, and a porch full of people who understood what this place really meant. Marjorie's house was officially open. We didn't call it a grand opening. Alma said that sounded too much like a shopping mall. Instead, we called it a gathering. A coming together of past, present, and what might still be. Curtis gave a short speech, funny, heartfelt, slightly off-topic the way old men tend to ramble when they feel something big. He talked about being seen again. About how, at his age, people stop listening. But not here. Then Lily read a poem she wrote, about roots, and rooms, and the scent of lavender on quiet afternoons. She finished with a line that made everyone pause. "A house built by hands, kept alive by hearts." I didn't speak much. Just stood by the garden gate, Marjorie's gloves in my pocket, and watched the people fill the porch, the chairs, the space between each other. There were veterans and widows, retired teachers, and one woman who used to be a traveling circus singer. I met her during our meal prep weeks earlier. She said she'd stay a month and had been here 4. She called the guest bedroom the best retirement gift I never expected. Every corner of the house had changed. The dining room had been expanded, with mismatched chairs from every thrift store in town. The walls were lined with photographs, black and white portraits of each resident when they were young. Smiling, vibrant, alive. We didn't want to forget who they had been, who they still were, beneath the years. The front room, once a dull gray, now held soft green walls, a book nook, and Marjorie's radio, still working, still humming through static as it played her favorite Motown records. The garden was full again. We planted tomatoes and bell peppers, herbs in old paint cans, wildflowers around the edges. Every morning someone watered. Every evening someone pulled weeds. It wasn't perfect, but it was loved. The back room became what Lily called the heart room. A place for quiet. Reading. Breathing. Crying if needed. No one ever had to ask permission to sit there. And my room, the basement I used to hide in, was no longer mine alone. We turned it into a workshop, just like Marjorie once dreamed. Tools neatly arranged, wood stacked in the corner, even a lathe for Curtis who liked to tinker. It smelled of cedar and memory. After the gathering, as the guests trickled out and the porch lights blinked on, Lily and I stood by the rose bush. The one Marjorie planted after her first remission. "You did it," she said. "No," I replied. "We did." She reached into her bag and pulled out a little brass plaque. We'd talked about it months ago, something simple, just a marker. She handed it to me. It read, "Marjorie's house, where love grows." We knelt together and placed it beneath the rose bush. I rested my hand on the soil and whispered, she'd be proud. The wind picked up, just slightly, as if in agreement. I thought back to the years when this house echoed with absence. The years when I mistook silence for peace. The years I thought love meant stepping aside to keep others comfortable. But not anymore. Now, the walls held stories. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread and tea. Laughter danced down the halls. And every person who walked through the door knew they mattered, not because they paid rent or shared a bloodline, but because they were seen. That night, I sat in Marjorie's old chair with a cup of tea. The porch was quiet again, not empty, just resting. The way all good homes do after a full day. Curtis waved goodnight from the garden. Alma passed me a cookie and said, "You should think about putting a guest book at the door. People are going to want to remember this place." I nodded. "You're probably right." Lily brought me a blanket and kissed my cheek. "Good night, Grandpa." And I realized, I wasn't just a father anymore. Or a widower. Or a man who'd been betrayed. I was the keeper of something sacred. Something earned. This house, our house, had lived through pain and silence and small cruelties. But it survived. Because love doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it rebuilds. Quietly. Steadily. With open hands. And tonight, in the warm glow of the porch lights, I knew one truth with my whole heart. Marjorie's house lives again.